Hey everyone, Prince Dabs a lot here, and today I'm going to be talking about the scenario Kali Ghati from the Black Sites book for Delta Green, the TTRPG. A Delta Green operative goes missing from a combat base in Afghanistan. A handful of agents must learn what discovery lured him across the wire. Then, they must bring them home. If your table is looking for a military-themed scenario, you can't go wrong with this one. We really enjoyed it. Without too much further ado, we're going to be going into spoiler territory, so if you think this is right for your table, send it to your handler, and if you're a handler, keep on listening as we walk through this scenario step by step. So this scenario comes with 6 pre-gen agents, and they are a mixture of military people, of CIA operatives, of contractors, and they all fit the theme very well, as your agents will be, first off, coming to this Air Force base and asking around, figuring out what happened to Tim Ellis, the person that disappeared in his hunt for this Kali Ghati, this mythical city of legend. Now, after they do the Air Force base, they're going to be going over to a nearby village, questioning those people there before heading out to find Kali Ghati itself. And that'll be a whole other can of worms as they approach that, which we'll go into later. First and foremost, I made some changes to this setup, given that I wanted to slot this into the end of my campaign. My agents were actually looking for Tim Ellis. They were looking for one of my previous agents at the table. Way back in Last Things Last, my agent found this machete from the Architect book, The Blood of the Sleeper, and he had been studying it in his downtime. It's this knife that has this blood coating in it that if blood touches it, it forms a vacuum and sucks in all their blood. And he was using it through a few scenarios, and when it hits a critical mass, the blood will drip off the blade and go travel out towards to go meet a god, as it says. So what I did is I took this and then used that as the instant to start Kali Ghati, where my handler arranged for this agent to go to the Air Force base and study, and that's when he went crazy. So the mystery about what drove this man over the edge was meta knowledge at my table, that they were tracking down an agent that they had lost track of, which is cool, and I liked how that was implemented into the campaign, but it did change a little bit about the meta knowledge and the mystery there that's going in. But my players aren't really meta gamers, and it was just a cool thing to tie it in. And I like this knife a lot for its home scene studies and stuff like that. A lot of stuff in this Architect book is good there if you're looking for stuff to insert in and stuff for your agents to research and do in your home scenes. Another thing that I did is that, given that I have a table of 3 players and there's 6 pre-gens, I had each of them double hand a pre-gen. They actually played 2 characters in this, which was really helpful, especially for running the village scene in the end, which I'll go into, because it allowed one half of their characters to go into the tunnels and they'll have to stay in the village and investigate. One issue you're likely to run into in running this scenario is you need to decide what kind of game you're going for here, because there's a few angles to take this. If you're looking for a convention game, there's a lot you can cut here. You kind of can ignore a lot of these relationships between each other and kind of their general attitude, because this scenario does present quite a large group of NPCs for what's already going to be a large player group, and they're not quite as characterized as I would like when it's trying to show you the relationships that's going on. So if you want to have a slow burn and introduce these relationships between each other and all their drivers and the stuff they like, and with all these extended interviews, then you're going to try to aim for this one to be, a 3-4 session or some kind of long, a little more of a longer game where you get to know these characters and you get invested. That way, when of course they die later in shootouts or whatever, you feel tragedy. Or if you're going for a convention game, I say you just kind of ignore this and just throw some people at them and let the players take the center stage with everything that's going on. So that's kind of a interesting split I saw. I also listened to the actual play by the author, and they removed the middle bit of the attack, which I think is really cool. So keep that attack in there, but that will extend this for a little bit longer than you might expect. My agents, hung out around the base. They got some of the clues from the laptop and from the destroyed stuff from the computer that, Tim Ellis was his cover name, left behind. And I really like this scenario's method for clues. I think more scenarios should kind of do this, where it just says, hey, if you have the skill, boom, you get it, which is such a crucial aspect of Delta Green, as far as like if your agent is competent, your agent is more competent than your player at times. So therefore, just having the skill at a certain percentage gets them the clues that they need, which again, I enjoy quite a bit. I think more scenarios should do that versus saying an agent who rolls, I love the 40% knowledge here. And the clues aren't that tough to get. So the real focus here is on giving them the clues and the interplay relationship between the soldiers on the base, the Afghans on the base, the way they exist in the local ecosystem of the area. So my players got all the clues, and then they went to the Afghan village. So at the Afghan village, the Afghans are actually quite helpful, and I enjoy that, and it kind of gives them opportunity. It even says here to mop up the rest of the clues that your agents might have missed, because this beginning of the scenario is very smooth and will kind of run itself as far as just handing out clues. And I really enjoyed them visiting the village, and they kind of had to be respectful, but still understood that the villagers aren't there about being, they're not evil, they're not villains, they're just people that live in this area that kind of know some rumors and are scared of this place. This is a good time to really step up the paranoia about the Kali Ghati, and that something is really wrong with this place. Like the villagers shouldn't really be hiding that. They don't want to really talk about it, and they think it's cursed, and you should never go there, because it ties into the ambush that's set up later, which I think is a really neat angle of the ambush actually just trying versus just being, a terrorist ambush. It is them, the village, trying to stop people from going to this place. They're kind of defenders, or keeping people away from this cursed land that they're so scared of. The incredible MRAP scene. I loved the scene. My players loved the scene. And going into this, we decided, hey, we're going to use all the tactical rules we have available. And I know, I can already hear the Discord calling out, I know Delta Green is not a place for battle maps, but if you're going to use battle maps, this is the scenario for it, which is what we did. I have these big dry erase board sheets, and I drew up the mountain pass in there. And I think battle maps really improved the experience, because this was a fun one. If you're going to be a military scenario, this one was a fun one to sit down and measure the squares of distance, worry about suppressing lethal fire and all that stuff to calculate into here, and take some longer times between your turn. And yes, you could run this two ways. You could either just go the intense action set piece that is trying to go for here, with the MRAP blowing up and flipping as they're ambushed by all these Taliban fighters, and they're shooting from the from the hills down at your players, and it should be pretty lethal as these their gunfire's off, not to mention the MRAP roll and all that. With it exploding. I mean, they have RPGs, but we really enjoyed taking our time with it, having them spot these enemy fighters as they appeared and gunning them down. And my agents did quite well and played quite tactically with moving from cover to cover and keeping their squad together as their team. So that was a really neat experience. And if you're going to, again, use battle maps for once in Delta Green, this is the one to do it, to measure out all your measurements. And it's cool to see that side of Delta Green, that Delta Green can be played pretty tactically and pretty board gamey. I also want to give my props to the writer for two things in this set piece. One is giving us all the weapon stats we need all on one page. Thank you, Shane Ivey. This is incredible stuff. I love just having this as a quick reference so I could look and pull and do all that. I also liked the turn-by-turn play here. It really gave me some guidance on how to run this exactly. Step A, step B, step C. And it was fun to have a playbook where my agents felt like they were competing almost against a clock, which they are, and have something that was not super nebulous and just written out. I really enjoyed this ambush, and I think that if you're going to be playing this scenario, you should include this ambush. And that's where we paused for our halfway point, was them driving and the explosions going off, then paused, and then resumed next time with them under gunfire and figuring it all out. So after this fantastic ambush scene of all the explosions and gunfire, your agents will then set off on the road again, assumably they'll collect their team and set off down the road. Now, this is the point when my agents kind of came in and told the other soldiers, because the other soldiers just got attacked and want to do everything per operating procedure and go back home, basically. Agents were like, no, guys, we have something bigger going on. This is, I think they even flashed some CIA stuff and said, no, guys, we're part of a bigger operation right now. We are your commanding officers. You guys need to listen to us. which is kind of a point of contention I could see your agents running into. So I did like that my agents kind of took control, and I would even present that because having a group of soldiers even coming in here with your team, because they're going to have some buddies with them in these MRAPs as they go on out, more players beside just your player agents. And that was good just to keep them with them and have this bigger force going in. There's then going to be a second luck roll when you're driving, whether your last remaining MRAP is going to be destroyed or not, and my agents passed that. So they went into Kali Ghati with this MRAP, which made me change and play around with the ending a little bit. One more thing of note, and that is with both the two-handing and the additional soldiers that are with the group. Basically, this scenario is tough. A, it's kind of a shredder, and B, if your player dies and doesn't have there's no real easy way to rejoin the scenario, which just doesn't feel good from a table standpoint, being like, nope, you died halfway through the scenario. Sorry, you can either go home or you can sit and listen to us all play and have fun. So by having some additional soldiers with the group, that A, gives them a chance to rejoin the fight, and I would either just have a character sheet ready or have the stat blocks for some of these NPC soldiers ready so you can just give it to them and say, hey, here you go, you're playing this soldier now. Or if when they're two-handing it, one dies, well, they still got one to sit there and care about. Just something to keep in mind that if you don't have a way for your agents to re-enter, these are some options, because again, otherwise it's just not really fun, and that's what we're all here for. We're all here to sit around and have fun. So the whole gimmick of this village is the fact that it's kind of been teleporting throughout time. I don't know if teleporting is the correct word. Sometimes it exists, and most of the time it does not. So it's kind of like a black hole in time as this village just like pops up, and it's still, eons behind what everyone else is, this cursed village. So I really like that idea, and I like the idea that there have been more excursions to this, like the Spetsnaz and the Russians in the previous decades. So what I did is I even set up a destroyed tank, like a tank that had its tire treads fall off. And yes, it's destroyed, but it's not old. And it was a Russian tank from the era. So I wanted to encourage the idea of the agent started thinking like, weird that this tank, should be about 40 years old. Why is it just sitting here not looking 40 years old? I mean, other than it being kind of wrecked, it still looks new. And I think that's an idea you should push throughout this village scenario. So my agents, when they were going through this village, and the village is pretty friendly at first. Like you're kind of going for, in the end, you're kind of shooting for like the Resident Evil 4, village scene, village intro scene. That's kind of what it's going for here. But at the beginning, they are pretty helpful. But you want to give hints that stuff is wrong. I mean, obviously they're insane and they're creepy when they're asking them about information about the idols. But the village is more than happy to shove off a bunch of agents to go up the cliff and go into the caves where they can go find Tim Ellis, which is where he is. Death Awakens the Sleeper. But I had some scenes of them like, one of the villagers they were talking to had like Russian dog tags that looked still pretty new. A few they noticed had like AK-47s in the back, again, new. And right before, violence broke out, one of them glanced outside of one of the houses, and there was the Russian soldiers like still being cut up for meat on the tables. Which, obviously, if this village, the Russians haven't been in this area for a long time. So, and that was a great thing of like, oh shit, that it really sells the gimmick of this village, which I feel like is kind of undersold as written. And I think it's a really neat idea that deserves more screen time. At this point in the scenario, some of your agents will be staying in the village, interviewing these agents. My team had an MRAP still, so they were kind of using that as a base. As stuff in the village got creepier and creepier, and answers got weirder and weirder, and it seemed like the villagers were all like excitedly like waiting for something to happen. And again, my agents were like poking around, seeing more of that like AK evidence that people have been here throughout time, but it doesn't look like that much time has passed. The weird mold over everything, and the other team goes up the hill and then descends into this temple as they go further and further down. Now, one point is there's like a little bit of lore here that's going to require a natural percentage that is just over what any of the pre-gens have. So if you're going to be running this with pre-gens, there's no reason to not bump up that pre-gens unnatural by like 4 points just so you can give them the lore dump, because otherwise it's just a missed lore dump. And I really like it. It involves, seeing this race of Cthulhu come on down, and this great temple under the ground that predates humanity has shifted and risen up. That this village exists around. So very cool, and gives you more lore that's going on here that, again, is just a missed opportunity otherwise. But this is why I had my agents two-hand player characters. They may not have realized in the beginning, but this is why now. So what we did is I had one half of my agents' players, everyone had one of their agents stay in the village, and then everyone had another one go up inside the temple. So when they're inside the temple, eventually what's going to happen is they're going to be followed. They're going to find Tim Ellis. His eyes have been torn out. He's there screaming harshly, trying to awaken this god that he found, which again was a previous agent at my table. So it was a good way of being like, ooh, my players, the agents didn't recognize these guys, but my players did, and it was just a good moment of horror. And a person will be like, oh man, this is what happens to Delta Green agents if they descend too far. So when they're followed, they found him, and they did pretty good at this, the unarmed combat rolls, and zip tied him up and got him thing. Well, what I had then is the three villagers follow them into the caves. And given that they understood the whole like blood awakens the sleeper, death awakens the sleeper, like don't kill these guys, and they were going to try unarmed combat rolls, what I had to do is I rolled, and I had the two villagers hack each other to death to awaken it with these agents inside. So it was a good moment of them looking at each other with happiness in their eyes and just start viciously tearing at each other. And that then awakened the sleeper and led to this great chase scene of the agents, scrambling through this village or through this temple to escape as it collapses, while everyone in the village below awakens into violence and starts coming alive and trying to kill all the agents, much like you're shooting for, again, the Resident Evil 4 scene at the beginning, which is where this like creepy village goes into full attack mode. And so that's the kind of vibe I was going for. And what I did for initiative orders, I just had the initiatives of the people in the cave, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I had the initiatives of everyone in the village, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we just swapped between those two. So it always felt like there was something going on and snapping back and forth between scenes. Again, being a scenario where we wanted to try out battle maps and some good tactical rules, I had a map of the village laid out, which was helpful because I still had an MRAP, and I used a bunch of cubes to show the enemies coming in. And you really want to show this like horde mode rush of all these villagers coming out of nowhere to attack. I mean, it's 3d6. That's a good amount of villagers every time that are going to start spawning. And I boosted those numbers a little bit because, again, they had their MRAP as like a good point of base to set up on and shoot down all the villagers. And they're really just holding out, waiting for the agents inside of the temple to get out and get back to the MRAP and have the squad escape. So there's not really like a time limit or an end game. It's just, can you survive this many waves till your team up there escapes, which was a cool gimmick to run for the scenario. And we had battle maps, again, that I think I had some villages still from my Curse of Strahd set. So I laid it all out, and I let them kind of drive around corners and try and find choke points where all these people are pouring out of houses and pouring out of alleyways. And again, on some missed shots, I was having more and more spawn to really feel like this big wave assault. And I really like that. Again, we don't really use battle maps that much. I think this is the only time we've used battle maps in Delta Green outside of just some basic maps to show where's where. So it was a really different experience and very cool to have them thinking about like, where can we choke point, where's angles, where's corners, what can we do here? And then the cut back to the more intense movie style version of inside the caves of them running while these things, while the god waking up. I had one agent go crazy in the caves and start trying to tear at his teammates and other agents. I only ended up having 2 guys make it out, which they had Tim Ellis with them, like slung over their shoulder, trying their best to get out, while another one of my players stayed behind, strapped some C4 and grenades to his chest, and waited for the villagers to rush him in the tunnels, along with the god to appear over him before he's like, I'll see you in hell, and pulled the pin and blew himself up and whoosh, a big explosion from up top. So it was a really really neat story moment to do, and a great comparison of the village assault with the guns and everything, with just our guns aren't going to work, we're just going to run for it in the caves. My agents then, made it out of the top of the thing, basically tumbled and fell as quick as they could down the cliff, while the other team was holding out and shooting at the people crawling up the cliffs to come kill them. Made it into the MRAP, everyone stuffed in and tore ass out of this village. And then they called in an airstrike, which leads me to night vision. So I think night visions, which I don't plan on running, has a really cool ending sequence of the players controlling drone operators and making all these rolls for it, like a good snap cut to a Delta Green military man coming in and being like, we need to bomb this village right now. Don't ask questions, drone operators, we're doing it. And so I basically ripped off that ending scene wholesale and shoved that into the ending of Kali Ghati, which I thought worked really well and kind of gave the knowledge that, Delta Green exists within the U.S. military apparatus and the program can pull strings when it needs to and help out, which it did. And that's going to be the closeout for Kali Ghati. And that's Kali Ghati. Now, while I quite enjoyed this scenario, that doesn't mean I don't have my criticisms of it. It seems to be kind of stuck in between two worlds, where it wants to kind of be this, like, screw you convention game, liquefying a bunch of agents all the time, brutal ambush, while it's also kind of trying to be this one talking about, like, the interpersonal relationships between a lot of the soldiers and the way they interact on the base, and I want you to really care about all these people that are there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing with the making you choose which kind of side you want it to be, but if you want this to be a quick one, you should definitely cut the MRAP scene in the middle, which is a shame, and cut down on some of the inner soldier relationships on the base. But however, I liked running this just full and meaty as it is. Just took me a little bit longer than I expected to. It also feels a little loose in that ending, so that's going to be something you're going to want to scale to your group. Again, my group had an MRAP, so I definitely bumped up the number of enemy combatants quite a bit and really focused on this horde rush. And it really did help out by having, like, cubes and minis and all these things to help signify that, along with in the caves being a little messy, but that's okay. You really just want to give your space for the players to exist in and try and escape out and roleplay and sling Tim Ellis over their shoulder and charge out of there as best they can. It also seemed like an ending that you kind of want to trigger the Death Awakens the Sleeper no matter what. And so it felt a little bad that my agents were smart enough to not trigger it, but because I wanted a cool set piece and this was kind of just agents we weren't going to keep playing with, I just triggered it by having them hack each other to death, which worked. But this definitely seems like a scenario that's built almost entirely on that god waking up. So as bad as it might be for your players, you want to make sure that happens. But we'll close out with some positives, and that is that, man, MRAP scene is cool. This is written very well. I really like the way Shane Ivey presents his clues and presents the, again, ways you can just get the clues by not even having to roll. That is something that I think is kind of lost sometimes in other Delta Green scenarios. And it just shows, the competency with the system. His charts of listing out all the weapons that are going to be used right there, incredible. And the step-by-step of, for example, like the MRAP ambush. I would have liked to see more of that step-by-step later in this scenario for the village assault scene, given that it just gives you such a cool and clear guideline for how to run something like this in ambush, where other authors might just put agents are ambushed, figure it out. So thank you for writing this scenario. I really enjoyed running it. And if you're looking for a fun military-themed scenario that is also kind of a shredder and is going to have a great mixture of standoffs and assaults and investigative, you can't really go wrong with Kali Ghati. Thanks everyone for watching this channel. Make sure to like and subscribe because I love watching those numbers go up. Comment below if you've had any experience with this scenario and you've done anything different than I have, or how you enjoyed playing it or running it. Thank you.